Welcome back, everybody, to Rasputin Gaming Presents. This is our ongoing Platinum Trophy and game guide for Elden Ring. And today's video is a supplement, if you would, an addendum to the game and why we make the builds a certain way. And we're talking about caps on um, your ability scores. So the first thing I want to talk about is Vigor and where the first soft cap is. The first soft cap is at 40 points. So below 40 points, every time you put 1 point in Vigor, you're going to gain 26 HP. And that's going to hold true all the way up and through 40. Starting with the next point you put after 40, so from 41 up to 60, you get half that number. You're only getting 13 points hit points per point you put into Vigor. So 40 is the first break point. I'm not sure you want to call it a soft cap, but the first break point. The next break point after that is at 60. And at 60 points, you gain 5.5 points of hit points per vigor point you spend. So you'll see the first increase is 5, the next increase will be 6, then 5, then 6, 5, and 6. So it's 5.5 points um, per point you put in up to 60, or from 60 on. Up to 90. And I don't know that anybody puts that many points in Vigor, but above 90, just for the record, it's 3.5 points per point you put into Vigor. So I'm not sure you want to go that high. I don't think anybody does. That's crazy building right there. So the next one we should talk about is Mind, and this is where you get your FP from. So there's a couple of breakpoints, and then there's, if you want to call them soft caps, a couple of soft caps. So first thing that happens at up from 1 up to 20 is you gain 6 FP per point you put into Mind. Above 20, so 21 to 50, the FP gain is 8.5 points. So it really starts to accelerate once you commit to Mind and having a bigger mana pool. You can really build it up quite large. At 55, the FP gain per point is only 4 points of FP. So it drops off and cuts in by 50% above that. And above 60, it's 2.5 points. So it gets really low. But even if you're building a pure sorcerer build like we're building, or well, not pure sorcerer, we're doing an Eldritch Ninja. But if you are going pure sorcery, it's rare that you will build anything above 50. Most of the time, you're going to be around 30 points. Um, because the points you're spending in Mind to big up a bigger mana pool or points you're taking away from DPS, and most often is better spent in intelligence, unless you reach one of the caps over there. So that's how that's going to work. Above 20, your sweet spot is between 20 and 50, really, with Mind. So if you want to grow your mana pool, it's a little bit slower. You get about 3/4 of points below 20, but above 20, you're doing pretty good. So endurance, you get roughly 1.5 points of stamina per point you put in endurance up until you get to 50. Above 50, you get 1 point of stamina for every 2.5 points you're putting into endurance. So it really drops off. It's like a 6 times negative multiplier on endurance. The difference that is going to matter to most people is the equipment load, which is at 25 points. So your first breakpoint where you're losing ROI on your equip load is at 25 points. So up to 25, you're doing pretty good, but you gain less equipment load above 25, and then the second breakpoint is at 60. And if you're putting 60 points in endurance, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it probably isn't a From Software or Dark Souls type game. But that's where the second breakpoint is above 60. So for the next items, strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and arcane. The first thing I'm going to talk about is weapon scaling. So if you have a weapon that's strength-based or dexterity-based or intelligence-based or faith or arcane-based, so things like the meteorite staff, it's an S scaling on intelligence and D on strength. So if you're attacking with your meteorite staff as your melee weapon, and it's going to change if you do, apply magic to it and then attack with it. But the first set of numbers, the for strength and dexterity, um, the scale goes 20, 55, and 80. So from 1 to 20 on both strength and dexterity, you get the same amount of advantage for every point you put in. From 21 to 55, that's you get a little bit less. That's your first breakpoint's at 20. So above that, you're starting to lose some weapon scaling, and then above 55, that's the second breakpoint, you get even less. And then finally, what most people are calling the soft cap, or really the hard cap, the third breakpoint is at 80. And above that, you are hardly getting anything worthwhile out of putting points into strength or dexterity. It just isn't worth it that high. You're better off putting it into vigor or something else that makes sense for you. So your soft cap points are 20, 55, and 80. So 0 to 20, you get quite a bit of gain. 20 to 55, a reasonable amount of gain. 55 to 80, a little less. And above 80, not much at all. And it basically works the same for intelligence, faith, and arcane-based weapons from a melee standpoint, from an attack standpoint, except that the middle number is 50, not 55. So it scales down by 5 points. So you even get less bang for your buck above 50 rather than 55 for intelligence, faith, and arcane-based weapons. Again, with a roughly, you can say like a hard cap at 80. But what makes the difference in those three is when you're getting into your spells. So if you're scaling sorcery or incantation with faith or incantation for arcane, and the scales are all a little bit different. So sorcery scaling, um, for every point you put in intelligence, you gain an equal amount of spell power, let's call it, all the way up to 60. There is no break below 60. So every point you put up to 60 makes a big difference in your DPS, and it just continues to be a nice flat slope, not flat, nice even slope, where every point matters as much as the one before it and the one after it. And then at 60 is where you run into your first breakpoint where you start losing ROI, return on investment, for sorcery scaling for points above 60. So for any intelligence build, you want to be putting the majority of your points, probably 3/4, at least 2/3, if not 3/4 of your points into intelligence, just because the bang for the buck is so much better than anywhere else. And then the last 25% or 30%, something like that, you want to be splitting it between vigor and mind so that you get some HP and a bigger mana pool. And it holds true, the same kind of analysis holds true for faith builds. Again, it's the same scale, 60 and 80, as the intelligence build. So every point you put in faith for your incantations just makes more sense to be running it up to 60 as quick as you can, just to make you all that much more powerful. Again, first breakpoint's at 60. You start losing your ROI after that with pretty much a hard cap at 80. It's not an absolute hard cap, but there's really no benefit to going above 80. The incremental increase is so minute at that point, it isn't really worth it, and you should be putting your points somewhere else. And then incantation runs basically half those numbers. So, I mean, incantation, arcane, holy mackerel raz. But for incantation scaling for arcane, the first breakpoint is at 30, not 60 like faith and intelligence. So anything you're doing with arcane power, it's only the first 30 points. and then you might as well just throw the brakes on right there. um, because you're getting diminishing returns at that point, and definitely at 45 you should, because that's the second breakpoint, not 80. It's 45. It's really low. Um, but but you'll know if you run it up to 45 to that second breakpoint and don't go above, you are still below the second breakpoint for the um, weapon scaling, which happened back at 50, or happens up at 50. So arcane scaling on weapons. So if you're going to do arcane scaling, you definitely want to hit 30. You should consider 45, but nothing over 45, is it's really just going to gimp your character and create all kinds of issues for you. So that is all of that. So briefly, um, Vigor for your HP, I would keep it below 40. You're getting 26 hit points per point you put into Vigor, and above 40, it's cut in half. So it really becomes burdensome to put anything above 40. And I would doubt you have it that high regardless of your build. I mean, I guess I could see some pure strength builds where you just want to health up like crazy. But that's my advice with Vigor, and that's why it doesn't really affect our build, but that's part of what we keep in the background of our analysis when we're adding points. For Mind, if you're going to commit to a bigger mana pool in Mind, anything between 20 and 50 is the sweet spot for gaining points. You might want to get to 25, maybe very near the end game. You want to be at 30. Um, but it does kind of make sense that if you're going to commit and you're close to 20 to start with, maybe in your arcane builds and maybe some of your faith builds, you bump it up a little bit over because you're getting quite a bit of bang for a buck above Mind. So my thought is 25. That's kind of what I keep in mind, is the number I want to shoot towards near the end game that we get. Endurance, it's kind of hit or miss for me. It regenerates really quickly. So it's just in some boss fights where you're having to dodge an attack or do strong attacks that it becomes an issue. Um, but you can just add points there all the way up to 50 and not have an issue at all. It's when you get above 25 points in endurance that your equipment load starts to lose value. So anything up to 25 is fine if you need the boost to endurance. I would say go for it. It's not something I add to because I just don't need it as in the builds that we're utilizing. But there you go. And then strength and dexterity from weapon scaling. As long as those are your main scores, anything up to 55 makes a lot of sense. Above 55, it starts to get a little bit hit and miss. So make sure that you're running a build that's going to be purely strength or purely dexterity after that with those kinds of weapons, and then you can run it up to the cap of 80. But certainly up to 55, you aren't losing much. Above 55 to 80, it still makes sense, but only in certain builds, and you have to be careful with it. Um, I don't presume that anybody is running intelligence, faith, or arcane based weapons based on ROI of what those are, but you see those caps there. It's really about scaling with your sorcery and your faith and your arcane on spell power. So if you're running intelligence or faith builds, you're going to want to run your intelligence up to 60, pretty much as quick as you can, just for the sake of max and DPS. Just know that you're losing weapon scaling above 50. So the last 10 points from 51 to 60 aren't going to be worth quite as much as every point up to 50. But that's fine. You're not building an intelligence or faith build based on weapon scaling. Not really. And then lastly, arcane. Same kind of deal. If you're doing arcane based spell power, you want to run it up to at least 30 as quick as you can, and then perhaps 45. It just depends in conjunction of what else you're doing. But both those numbers are below the 50 mark, where weapon scaling changes for the second time on arcane. So you're going to be safe there. So hopefully that answers your questions about where you need to be with weapon scaling, sorcery scaling, and how your attributes work, including vigor, mind, and endurance. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat in YouTube on the YouTube video. Put in the comment section. I'll definitely answer. Um, we hope to see you in future videos. Don't forget to friend and follow us on Twitch if you want to see me live stream this stuff. Follow us on, subscribe on YouTube and like the video if you learned something. That little bump helps me, and I think it's helping everybody. If you don't know what the cap numbers are already or haven't explored it, this should make sense for you and help you uh, definitely improve your Elden Ring game um, from a theoretical standpoint and how you want to manage your builds. So with all that, you guys be safe out there, and we will catch you next time.